exploring this process of enterprise architecture in miniature, about applying the same principles right down to the level of a single person organisation and their architecture, their enterprise. So far we've looked at the big picture, we've looked at the first steps, we've looked at how there are multiple scopes and particularly worked on one of them. Now what we want to do is go into the beginnings of moving from scopes towards plan, and to do that we start looking at prototypes. Now I'll pick a single part of this overall idea that we're working on, which is the idea of a digital nomad, myself being a digital nomad, working to move around, to show, to teach, to demonstrate, to put all of these architecture ideas into real world practice by teaching it, by demonstrating it, by helping people build their own. So of all of the scopes, the one that I want to look at here is the one that needs the most practical approach straight away, which is the feasibility of actually doing the van life bit. The rest of it's fairly straightforward, but the van and living in a van is going to be a key part of it. We need to make sure that it works. So to do that, we shift now from architecture towards design. We want to apply the design criteria, the success criteria, to the build scope. So we now need to build virtual prototypes. It's expensive to test, very expensive to test something out in real all the time. We're going to save a lot of effort and time just simply testing with virtual prototypes. So we're looking at constraints, we're looking at priorities, we're looking at requirements, we're looking at feasibility. One example here is separation of concerns. We want to have only one use visible at a time. Now there's a lot of uses going on. I've got to be able to run a sort of a miniature workshop in the space, hence the need for a whiteboard, for example. I want to be able to do filming, editing, tool development, all of those kind of things in that space as I'm moving around, working with other people. But I don't want to have it all mixed up with the living space, the bed, the kitchen, whatever. So I want to have separation of concerns such that only one use is visible at a time. I've also got to look, another concern is the utilities demand. What is the power requirement and how am I going to service that? What is the water requirement? How am I going to service that? Another one is looking at things like requirements for storage and for access, because there's an awful lot of stuff in a very small physical space. I've got to store everything to live for a month or so at a time and work with all of the tools for work for a month at a time. How am I going to do that? How is it going to work? Where's everything going to go? Everything depends on everything else. Also need to look at feasibility, look at the cost, look at the time, look at the effort. If it's too much cost, then it's not worth doing. I can sort that out through virtual prototyping, getting some grasp of what is the actual cost, the effort, and so on. And one of my concerns that I have is about reuse. I want to make sure that there's no structural change to the vehicle, that the vehicle could be used just as an ordinary van if necessary. Or if I want to sell it on, then it doesn't require someone to demolish an entire mess of pre-built stuff. So for example, typical in a van are rails that you can connect things to, so that you can add bits and move bits out, change it as it goes along. So I know it's going to change, so I need to design for change, design for the changes in usage and so on. And the point about an architecture is that each of those prototypes is all about connecting everything to everything else. It's not just designing one bit, but how it works as a whole. That's where it becomes architecture as well as design.